Sarah, how are you today?
I'm absolutely brilliant. How are you, Anthony?
What are we talking about?
We are talking about, we've a lot on the agenda today. The first question is the question on everybody's mind over the last couple of months, years maybe. Here we go. Anthony and Sarah, why does a road bike cost as much as a motorbike? It's true, isn't it? You can buy a motorbike.
It is true. I bought my first bike and it had Dura-Ace 9-speed. They're on 12 now. And full OC, it was a Trek at the time, so they had an OCLV carbon, which was their top of the range carbon. That cost me €2,500 new. A new specialized,
which was a lot of money back in the day.
I mean, it wasn't like 1982. I bought
How
it
many years ago was that though?
2010.
Yeah, so
2009.
Yeah, it's like a good few years ago.
It was a lot of money for a bike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still a lot of money for a bike.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
A specialized SL8 with Di2 is €14,000 right now.
Ooh.
But wait for it. A Harley Nightster Special, which looks like the bike that Arnie rode in Terminator, €13,400.
All right, okay.
600 quid.
I know, make it make sense. Now, I did a little bit of research on this, and in a motorbike, there's 2,348 components. Your average bike will weigh about 340 pounds. So you're getting a big chunk of metal and a lot of tech there, for your 13,400. And in a bike, you've got about 1,000 components, and that's going to weigh. I mean, we know what they weigh. 37 pounds, it said in the research that I did. So you're kind of thinking this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And if you look into the numbers, in 2022, there was actually 143 million bikes that were sold globally. That's nearly 3 times the amount of motorbikes that were sold over the same period. And that to me would mean that, that means that there's loads more bikes being manufactured, so therefore they should be cheaper than motorbikes. But it's not the case, unfortunately, because when you have a little look underneath the hood of this, most of the bikes in that 143 million are kind of lower level, entry level leisure bikes. You've got your city bikes and your
you
cargo
still think
bikes.
There is some economies of scale when you're producing that many bikes. Especially we know that a lot of frames come out of the same few factories in Thailand, Taiwan, China. Like, they're not reinventing the wheel every time. They're kind of selling us this R&D as why they're so expensive is the party line. The R&D is driving the prices up. But are we led to believe there's no R&D in the motorcycle industry? I don't know anything about it, but one would assume there's still quite a lot of research and development.
Well, the R&D, that is a massive feature in the price of a road bike. And apparently, from looking into the motorcycle, that sector, that technology has kind of plateaued over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So they're not putting as much into R&D in that industry. So that's why they're saying we're paying a lot more money for road bikes. Now, the road bikes, we know they're still evolving. I know you're a little bit skeptical about that. They all come out of the same factory, but they are evolving very, very quickly. If you look at the difference between your components from that bike that you bought back in 2004 and the components and the shapes of the bike and how aerodynamic they are and how much time they spend in the wind tunnel, it has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And they haven't seen that in the motorbike industry in the same period of time.
Okay, so that's a good point. So what we're talking about is the tip of the spear, what's driving it forward at the very top. I don't watch superbikes, but there is definitely innovation season on season in superbikes. There's no way that they're not innovating year on year the exact same way. Max Verstappen's Formula 1 car this year, it's not the same as Max Verstappen's car last year. It's not the same as his car last week. They're bringing changes in so fast. The innovation is so rapid. The iteration in terms of aero testing, it's so fast paced in those industries. What's happening in both Formula 1 and supercars is that's not dripping down to the consumer bikes. Just because Max Verstappen drives a Formula 1 car doesn't mean I drive a Formula 1 car. But because Pogacar...
Or you should drive a Formula 1 car.
But because Pogacar rides a Colnago, I need to ride the same Colnago as Pogacar. It makes no sense.
I think it does actually make sense in ways, because if you look at the Formula 1 or these, let's say, very, very high-end motorcycle bikes, and they can cost up to $1 million to, create these super high-end, super fast bikes. It makes sense because that's not attainable for the average person. A person who is,
working 14,000 for a bike that you can crash and break in 1 minute.
I totally agree, but it is an attainable price. It is attainable for a lot of people. And that's why they're like, why wouldn't I cycle the same bike that Pikachu has? There's one other point that I think is important to cover, and that's about the customization of your bike. So if you go on to buy your Harley Nightster Special, you're going to go on, there's no different size frame. You might have a choice of 4 color combinations to choose from, but there's very little speccing that you will do. And the bike companies are saying that basically because you can go on to the bike company, you have to pick your frame, you have to pick your components, your stem size, all of that adds on the labour costs of an actual mechanic putting your bike together.
But that's a market. Like the mechanic isn't putting your bike together that much. If we're talking about retail or manufacturing, but at retail level, the mechanic doesn't really put your bike together. They come basically pre-built.
Disassembled or assembled.
Yeah, assembled. Yeah. And there's very little. There's a few bits of tightening to do. And the idea that they're bespoke, like there's a 54, a 56, a 58, and a 61 if you're a giant. And like that's basically it. And the bespoke element is you're running a stem anywhere between 100 mil and 130 mil.
Yeah, but there's more variations. There's different colours. Now people are getting obsessed by crank length. You can go electric gearing, you can go mechanical, you can go disc brakes. Maybe not rim brakes anymore, but there is a lot of permutations.
This stuff is not driving the price up. I just call a spade a spade. That stuff can't be driving the price up. You have the same choices in anything. What colour seat you're going to go with, what colour steering wheel you're going to go with. I think it's aero that's driving it up, and that's the cycling industry's agenda to impose aero on the rest of us. We don't need aero. Nobody cares about aero. Like there's tests that I've seen from manufacturers, the difference from their very top of the line bike to their entry level bike. So you look at Specialized SL8 all the way down to their entry level aluminium. It's about 20 watts difference. And now having Josh Portner from Silka on, who works a lot with these brands in the wind tunnel, he told me what they will do is they'll bring a bike into the wind tunnel and they'll fire so many different yaw angles at it until they get an angle that validates their assumption that this is a fast bike. So if they're advertising 20 to 40 watt differences between their top of the line and their entry level, the likelihood is it's a lot less than that. In reality, any of the data I've seen on a 40 kilometer TT, there's less than 30 seconds difference between the same components, same rider, same skin suits, frame A and frame B, with A being the top of the line and the other one being the bottom of the line. That's minuscule. We don't care about aero. I don't care about aero. And because they're forcing aero on us, there's been no innovation around what actually matters to the end user, to the customer. There's no innovation around not getting a sore arse when you're out on the bike. There's no innovation around the bike not breaking if I have a crash in my local criterium, about it not scratching if someone else puts their bike up against mine on the coffee shop. These seem like things that you could easily fix. Also, there's no innovation around making the bike easy to use. Like they've got harder to use. I used to be able to take apart that Trek in the evening and put it back together. Now you need to bleed bike brakes. You need to plug your Di2 into computers. They're getting difficult to work on. So the innovation has gone the wrong way on that as well. The hyper focus on aero for me is the wrong focus.
Yeah. No, look, the problem is that people are going to pay this money. The bike manufacturers will stop producing these super expensive bikes, or the price will come down if people stop buying them. And I just can't see that, because if, for instance, I always talk about status, how people want to increase their status. Some people do that by training 20 hours a week and going and winning a Cat 1 or Cat 2 race. Some people can't do that and they're like, do you know what? I want to increase my status here. And if I have that 14,000 brand new specialized bike, I'll look like a bit of a dude on the group ride. This brings my level up and people will be like, oh, he's doing something right in some way, in some part of the psyche. So as soon as people stop buying these bikes, the bike industry will have to have a comeback and reduce the price, but that's not going to happen.
Do you know when people are going to stop buying them? Now. They've stopped.
They have.
Like the industry's falling apart. If you look at the top of the line Specialized, I keep referencing Specialized. 2 years ago, it was $2,000 more expensive than their top of the line Specialized. Now, And as you said, like these items, they're only as valuable as somebody is willing to actually take their credit card out of their pocket and pay for these items. And it's starting to crumble. The house of cards is coming down. And maybe this is kind of the dirty little secret that no one in the cycling industry wants to talk about at the moment, because a lot of journalists, their job is dependent on the sponsors who feed these, brands. So it's not been talked about much.
Yeah, it's not being talked about much. And I don't know if you're leisure cyclist or the guy who's doing all of these sportives who is, and has that expendable money, who has 15 grand in his arse pocket to spend on a bike. I don't know how much he's keeping an eye on the industry. But yeah, we have seen some very, very kind of frightening things happening. Very recently, BMC, they're a Swiss company. I mean, amazing bikes. They have the Swiss government, essentially, they've applied to the government for funding. Now, they haven't received the funding yet. They're basically filled in all the paperwork just to have it to press go if things get any worse, because they don't want to let people go. They don't want to have redundancies or cut people's hours. And the Swiss government have a scheme basically where they will put some money into this, companies to keep them rolling until better times come. So BMC are in trouble.
Roadman, I'm going to date myself here, but I've been riding the bike for almost 20 years. And in that time, I've cycled through every cycling apparel brand out there. And I kept swapping out different apparel brands each season until I found LeCol. There's something really different about LeCol. And as soon as you slip into the gear, you notice it feels different. It feels better. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Janto Barker on the podcast. He's the LeCol founder. And his dedication to crafting the fastest, most refined cycling apparel out there, it's nothing short of inspiring. Janto isn't just trying to create gear. I get the feeling he's actively and obsessively trying to perfect cycling gear. Trust me, as soon as you slip on the LeCol kit, as soon as you zip up that jersey, you can feel that commitment. The proof for LeCol, it's in the pudding. This is the same kit that Jay Hindley wore when he clinched overall victory in the Giro d'Italia. There's a confidence that comes with wearing apparel that's been battle tested and podium proven in races like the Giro d'Italia. Trust me, feeling good on the bike means you're going to perform better. If you have a second, I highly advise you to jump on over to lecol.cc and check out their amazing range of kit and experience this feeling for yourself. And the Trek CEO, who Le Monde absolutely hates, and he slayed him in the interview, Burke, he had a statement that I seen recently where he said the global bike market is in chaos, with high levels of inventory at wholesale and retail levels, leading to significant and continued discounting. He said retail sales were also below Trek's forecasts, including in January and February this year. He said the company not hit a single monthly sales target in the past 15 months. And as a result of this, Trek have reduced their number of SKUs by 40%, an internal document has said, and 10% layoffs company-wide. And that's to go with Specialized announced a 3% layoff, and they basically got rid of all their influencers and, kind of brand ambassadors. And Wiggle's gone into administration.
Yeah, absolutely. Wiggle was bought for like 10 million a couple of days ago. I don't know who it was bought by, but really a very low sum for a company that was so gigantic in the height of cycling, triathlon, kind of fitness. But yeah, the influencers are gone. They are not getting even free kit, free bikes, anything anymore, never mind being paid to advertise their, company's equipment. So yeah, it's frightening the way it's going.
Needs a bit of a reset industry-wide, and I can see one or two big brands coming in and consolidating the whole thing. We've seen Agi Dozer Decathlon this year. Decathlon's first foray into really the top end biking, and the data on the bike looks pretty good from the wind tunnel, as much as you can believe that data internally from teams on how fast their bikes are. The bike looks good. I know Sam Bennett's riding it. It's meant to be a good bike. I think we're going to see more companies like that coming in and having a land grab and consolidating, 5 or 6 of these other brands that we don't need that much choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's only a matter of time. I haven't seen any of the Van Rysel. Is it Van Rysel bikes? Haven't seen any of them out and about yet, but I do know that we will.
Decathlon's only up the road.
Yeah, I really do hope that we start seeing way more. I am seeing more of the kit knocking about, things like that. But yeah, the bikes, I'm looking forward to chatting to somebody who has one and seeing how they find it. But yeah. Maybe it's because the bike industry has been a little bit greedy and now it's kind of biting them in the ass.
Bold claim. Give me the next question.
Okay, Anthony, I listened to the Greg LeMond interview part 2 and it was super.
Tell me.
Throw sugar at me. It got me thinking about the prevalence of doping in amateur cycling. What's your thoughts on this? Do you think Cat 1, 2 and 3 and vets are perhaps doping to get an edge? That's a really interesting question. It's like, before you jump into what you think, recently in the last week or two, there was a bit of a kerfuffle in a race in Valencia, where there was 130 riders there was 180 riders at the start line. And as the race progressed, they all got wind that the doping, people were there going to be at the finish line testing, and 130 of the riders dropped out. Now, I did a little bit more digging into that as well. Apparently this race is very, very very difficult. And normally only about half of the group would actually end up finishing anyway. So I'm not saying 130 of these riders dropped out because they were doping. Apparently that's kind of normal, that there's a lot of DNFs for this particular race. But that sounds very high.
Yeah, but also they're different things. So to answer the first question, you think Cat 1s, 2s, 3s and vets, is there people doping? Yeah, undoubtedly there is people doping, because you mentioned status. People are motivated by different stuff. People are motivated by financial. That's why people dope in the World Tour, and they dope locally to be the local hero. Is there a significant number of Cat 1s, 2s, 3s doping? I don't think so. I've seen definitely red flags in my time racing where you see this huge increase in performance level from somebody over like a 3-week period, and that's just not in line at all with what you'd expect from them. But it's been rare, and because there's a lot more goes into winning at that level than just straight out physiological. I think you're going to see more doping. I spoke with Zach on the podcast a couple of days ago. I think it's out on Wednesday, and he was top 10 in the esports. I think you're going to maybe see more doping in that area than you're going to see in road racing, because road racing is so multifaceted. Doping's not going to help you go around a corner. Doping's not going to help you to, utilize energy better in the bunch.
If there was a magic doping pill I could take to
you need that corner one.
To take corners better, I'm sorry, hands up.
A few lads in the group, right, can use to descend them doping as well. But so yeah, I think there's a number definitely greater than 0 that are doping in amateur races. It's a bit tragic, I have to say, if you're one of those that's tempted to cross that edge. It's a bit tragic. Now the Valencia thing is different, because it's like, if I am an amateur Cat 1 or Cat 2 rider, not taking it that serious, basically me at the moment, where I'm doing a bit of training, kind of mailing it in, we're going to races, and then all of a sudden you see dope control at the finish line. Like, you're not going to finish that race. You could potentially get called on a random dope control. Like, what's your upside rolling across that line and going into dope control? Have you been at a party where someone was smoking weed recently? Yeah. There's a 4-year ban, and there's your name pulled through the mud, potentially lose your job, putting stress on relationships.
Have you been getting your supplements from some dodgy, your protein, cheap protein online, and it's been tainted with XYZ?
Like, you're not looking for pure sport certified if you're Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, and you're not typically tested. It was different when I was getting tested all the time, and you knew the tester was calling to the house. You're scanning everything, making sure it's pure sport certified, making sure it's batch tested. There was a case here in Ireland actually a few years ago where someone got randomly tested at a Cat 2, Cat 3 stage race. I won't name him, even though it's out in the public sphere. And he tested positive for marijuana, and he got a ban because of that. But he comes from a small rural town in Ireland, and his name was dragged through the mud because of that, and reputational damage because he smoked a bit of weed at a party. It's obviously not performance enhancing. So I would say, of those that dropped out, how many dropped out? 130?
Yeah.
You could say maybe half of them just got dropped and didn't finish the race.
Yeah.
So you have 65 odd people. I would be saying 98, 99% of those are recreational.
What about this fella, though, that went off the road and went through the bush to avoid entering the finish line and preventing the anti-doping agents from being able to control him?
Well,
bit of a red flag there, maybe.
Yeah, or is it like... I've got tested at the end of stage races. I've got tested on stage 4 at the end of a stage race. 4th stage, I see the tester. I'm like, I know they're coming to test me. ruins your evening. So you get to drive home about 3 hours later than everyone else. You're hanging around. You're dehydrated after the race, so you can't go for a piss. You've this lad coming into the shower with you in case you sneak a piss out when you're in the shower. Yeah. It's a miserable experience. If there was a hedge there, I would have been gone into it as well. I'm all for a clean sport, but it's...
I have to say, when you were being tested and the whereabouts, so basically Anthony had to tell everybody all of the time where he was so that the testers could show up at any time. And oh my God, it was the bane of our lives. And they would always just arrive just as you had something nice planned, a nice dinner, going away for the weekend. They'd always just knew to rock in at the wrong time. They'd be here for hours. Oh, absolutely hated them. Yeah. Okay, next question. Anthony, do you agree with the super technical and twisty sprint finishes? There was a big crash in Tirreno Adriatico last week. Yes, it was very slippy, technical, and I find it hard to watch sprints anyway, but those like super technical ones, everyone's jostling, heart was in my mouth. I'm watching it like behind a cushion. MyWhoosh is hands down the best virtual cycling app for home, and it's redefining indoor training at no cost. Yep, it's absolutely free. And setting up MyWhoosh is really easy. Just download the MyWhoosh app, connect your device like your Wattbike or your smart trainer, and off you go. Now, if you're feeling competitive, there's weekly races for every category from beginner to pro. Plus, there's insane prize money up for grabs. Now, if you've no plan to race, that's no problem. There's hundreds of free training plans and workouts that are designed to really push you to your limits. You can enjoy daily group rides and group workouts, and you can customize your avatar all without opening your wallet. So go on over to the MyWhoosh app and have a look around. Why spend money on monthly subscriptions elsewhere when MyWhoosh offers all of this for free? So join MyWhoosh today. It's available on iOS, macOS, Google Play, Apple TV, or click on the link in the show notes to get started.
I think we need to move to an era of data on these sprint finishes and stop guessing which is going to be a sprint finish. If they use, anyone that races the bike professionally knows what the dangerous finishes are. Why don't we have data on that? And if you know it's going to be a super technical finish, there should be a threshold that you can't, be coming through there historically with more than 15% of the field still in the front. Right. Because there could be a super technical finish in the last 500 meters of Milan-San Remo. We know statistically there's almost no chance there being a bunch sprint in Milan-San Remo. There's going to be a reduced group sprint at most. We just need to start using data and stop running from these off 50 years ago.
How would you do that? How would you even say, okay, like the top 15, anyone who's behind the top 15, 20 in a group, they're neutralised or something? Or
no, but it's just spread out. Like there's no incentive to go full gas and take risks if you're coming in for 40s. Pros don't do that. So all the risk is for a stage win. So if you're coming in a group of 100, there's 100 people still in that are willing to take risk for to win that stage. If you're coming in the group of 15, there's obviously only 15 that have to navigate these twisty finishes. So you can have a super technical finish if there's only going to be 3 people coming into the finish. It can be as technical as you want.
But how do you stop the 100 people? How do you propose that we stop the 50 people getting to
the train? The train's going to do it. So,
so put in more climbs, put in more kind of points here and there.
Yeah, the races they're going to, Tour of Flanders is not going to have 150 people coming to the line. There's just too much elevation over the course of Tour of Flanders. So you could put a very technical finish into Tour of Flanders.
Okay.
But yeah, Adam Hansen from the CPA was on the podcast, and there's a lot of ways that if you get creative that you can reduce this stuff. You can have like manufactured turns coming into stuff like hot dog turns that are thinning the field out coming into finishes. So, Formula One manages to do this with a lot of thought in course planning, and then course planning is a little bit of an afterthought for these type races. So that needs to evolve.
Yeah, I have to say I watched that, and as I said, behind the cushion, I was just, because it was kind of wet as well, slippy, then there was crashes. It just looked like chaos to me. Then felt like the barriers were very, very close together. I know it's a good spectacle, but even as a cycling fan, I would prefer not to see those kind of crashes and dangerous riding than having something that's super, in inverted commas, entertaining. Okay, Anthony and Sarah, can you talk about the helmet that Visma Lease A Bike wore a few weeks ago for that Team Time Trial. Is it the worst helmet ever? And do you think that the sport has finally lost the plot? Jesus, that helmet broke the internet. It was bigger than Kim Kardashian's bum, wasn't it? It was just like... The helmet probably was bigger than her bum as well. But yeah, what do you think, Anthony? Have we completely gone insane?
Like, if you asked someone on the street about any TT helmet, like, you look like an alien. Like, these aren't fashionable items to begin with.
You look like a gobshite, like a spa, I think.
In any cycling kit, none of this is stylish. None of this is cool. So to say this is the least cool of the non-cool stuff, I don't know. If it tests well, it's an aero helmet. It's not a fashion parade.
Well, you see, that's the problem. None of the testing has been released. We don't know how more aerodynamic it is, and we don't know the cost of it. And apparently, now, even though these rules have been broken all of the time by tech companies, by helmets, bike companies, all of that kind of stuff, they're not supposed to release these products unless they're available to the market. But this helmet isn't available to the market yet. I've searched high and low. I've basically been on the dark web looking for a price for one of these things or a name, and it was not forthcoming at all. Apparently it does fit into this. The UCI have dimensions that helmets must fit into, as to kind of keep a little bit of a,
so let's not start wearing traffic cones.
And apparently it does fit into these proportions, but jeez, it just looked absolutely insane.
If it's fast, use it. All the helmets look stupid.
They all look stupid. The Specialized sock last year, or in 2022, with that Specialized helmet with the sock, like the balaclava.
That makes sense to me, though.
It does.
Like, anyone that's done a TT, that'll make sense to them if they've used similar brands to me, like Bell, like Giro, because the helmet, it just slips into your eyes. And when you're in that TT position, you can't take your hand off to readjust it. So having something that just holds the whole thing in place.
Oh, is that what it was for? I thought it was to make your neck. Not that I'm saying that cyclists have jowls. They definitely don't. But just to kind of make the neck, ear, head area a little bit more aero.
Well, I think it holds it in place.
I didn't think that after seeing those helmets last or in 2022, I didn't think it could get any more ridiculous. But they have now been banned by the UCI. So the UCI said that it's even going to come and review this Visma Lease A Bike helmet as well. And kind of they're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be allowed or not. Apparently within the UCI, there's a big push for helmets not to increase your performance, but to actually do what a helmet is made for, and that's to prevent head injury if there's a crash.
That's not happening.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what the UCI are hoping to do.
Last question of the week.
Last question of the week. Anthony, a lot of riders seem to be talking about kilojoules instead of training stress score. But what are kilojoules and why is this relevant? I tried to look it up online, but basically there was just a lot of information about calories versus kilojoules, but not much specific information about training.
It is actually tricky to look up online. I've had a few people asking why I use kilojoules as a metric, and they tried to research themselves and they said they got tied in knots.
Yeah, you're not just gatekeeping either. A lot of the coaches that you've interviewed, like Alexander Boo, all of those kind of really high-end coaches, they use kilojoules too.
Yeah, it's a measure of the work done during a ride, I think is why people use it, because kilojoules, it's a direct measure of the mechanical work performed, unlike calories, which are an estimation of energy expenditure. So calories can be affected by stuff like your efficiency levels or your metabolism. So that means the kilojoules, they're a more accurate way to quantify actual work done. Now, you can have a play around with this yourself and try to understand, if you go out the door and you want to produce 100 kilojoules of energy, how long do you need to ride at 200 watts for? So for me, it's around 200 watts is about 8 minutes for most people. I don't know what affects that, but 200 watts, 8.5 minutes will produce 100 kilojoules of energy. Okay. Where it's actually useful, because all that just sounds like gobbledygook, where it's actually useful is if you zoom out and you want to look at your total workload over a macro period. So you want to look at, say we looked at your workload for 2023 versus 2024, we could look and you could say, okay, last year, Sarah rode 100,000 kilojoules last year. This year, she's ridden 120,000 kilojoules. So you've had a 20% bump in your workload for the entire year. Now, that's difficult to do if you're just using duration, because duration doesn't factor in intensity in the same way. So we could say, you rode 200 hours this year, but it doesn't tell the full story like kilojoules does. Another really cool thing to do is you were targeting the Rift. So we could say, okay, we know the Rift is going to be, we'd have to research historically what the kilojoule expenditure is for someone with your projected finishing time. But say the Rift is going to be a 5,000 kilojoule event. Now we could zoom out and go, okay, well, how many one-day rides have you done that have been 5,000 kilojoules? Because if you're just showing up to your event to do a 5,000 kilojoule ride for the first time without any prior preparation of doing that, it's most likely not going to end well. So you can historically look back and then anchor it and go, okay, last year Sarah completed 4 5,000 plus kilojoule rides over the course of the year, which is maybe close enough to true. And then you can start kind of preparing this season and go, okay, well, actually, this could be a good target because historically, maybe Badlands, which is a 28,000 kilojoule expenditure over 3 days, isn't going to be a great move for you when you've never ridden over 5,000 kilojoules. So that's why it's super useful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation, because when I was looking it up, it's like are you using kilojoules? And then you're trying to, based on the amount of kilojoules your device is telling you you've used, then trying to eat to replenish, kilojoules through your food instead of calories. Is this but it seems to be more of a training, a metric that's used in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah, you can also use it to guide your nutrition over the course of a race. But I think, the kind of the perspective that's confused a lot of people, because most people are familiar with kilojoules in a nutrition perspective. Okay, I've eaten this, now I should replace this. But it's that idea of using it as a benchmark for what your rider's like. If, I see you at the end of the day in Girona and I go riding and I say, what did you do? You could say to me, I rode 3 hours with 3 climbs that were 20 minutes each. And then I start to get an idea of what your ride is like. But that starts getting more difficult to describe if it's like, okay, I've done 3 hours with 21-minute climbs. An easier way to just say that is, I've done 2,800 kilojoules. Okay. And I get a feeling then of what that's like because I've ridden 2,800 kilojoules in the past.
The only thing is that kilojoules, let's say, it will take in the exact amount of force that you're putting through the pedals. So it's not really a metric that you can use for running or swimming. I think, again, you're kind of getting, there's a lot of algorithms and different kind of maths that has to be brought in when you're talking about other sports.
You could use it for a run, different discussion, but you could use it for running with a power meter now.
Yeah, because we have a power meter on the bike, it's really accurate with regards to the power that we're putting down. But we're still using more energy than the kilojoules is telling us, aren't we? Because, you're engaging your core, you're rocking, your heart rate is going up. It's so what I'm hearing from you about kilojoules is it's just a training
Kilojoules
metric.
is a direct measure of what you're putting in. You're talking about kilocalories, which start taking in efficiency levels into that. But that's a definitely discussion for another day. Before you wrap up, I want to do a MyWhoosh session of the week. MyWhoosh session of the week this week. This is again based off my conversation with Zach, which is coming out on Wednesday. It's actually not a session. It's a race. Go and race on MyWhoosh, because talking to him, he's racing there every week. And he said it's the best kept secret in cycling at the moment that almost everybody is making prize money for racing because they don't have the participation levels. If you show up as a female rider and complete the race, regardless of what category you are, you're getting paid. So if anyone likes free money for just riding your bike, MyWhoosh races are that at the moment, because there's prize money for every single category. It's not like you need to be the best Cat 1 to win. You can also even sandbag the power profile test as a Cat 1 pretend you're a Cat 4 and go and make money.
Don't do that, folks. But if you've any questions about racing, I haven't in myself. I haven't raced. I have spent a lot of time in MyWhoosh and I am hoping to race. But if any questions about racing or how to get set up for racing or testing protocol or, setup protocol, send me a DM on Twitter. Best place to get me.
Folks, thanks for tuning in to this podcast. If you enjoyed it and you want to hear another conversation between myself and Sarah, please click up here, listen to us debate hookless rims, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Catch you next day.